Greetings from Alexandria, Virginia, and the AMTRAK station. This is the Alexandria Union Station, south of Washington, D.C., and west of downtown Alexandria. We are getting ready to board the AMTRAK Palmetto, train number 89 south to Savannah, Georgia. Across the road from the station is the magnificent Masonic Temple, the George Washington Lodge. And here, the War Memorial, dedicated in 1940. Another storyboard about Alexandria in the Civil War. And of course, Alexandria was occupied by the Union forces very early on. We'll enter from the baggage room end here into the very beautifully maintained, preserved, into the waiting room. Debbie patiently waiting for the train. Amtrak's Palmetto trains 89 and 90 from New York City to Savannah, Georgia and return began in 1976. They more or less follow the route of the original Palmetto Limited, originated by the Atlantic coastline in 1909 and continuing in various configurations until 1968. The original Palmetto Limited was an overnight train with sleeping cars, a full dining car, and a cafe lounge. Its Amtrak incarnation started as a daytime coach-only train with a cafe car, and although it did become an overnight sleeping car train for a while in the mid-1990s, it is once again a day train with unassigned seating in 3 coaches and a cafe car between them and a business class coach with reserved seats. There is also a baggage car for checked baggage. Well, here we are on the Palmetto, heading down through the Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia suburbs. Not much to see outside. Gonna head up to the cafe car and get something to eat for breakfast. Here we have the galley section of the cafe car. Got myself a breakfast in the alley. Very good. Alright. Now the scenery on the Palmetto's route is nothing to write home about. From north to south, the tracks pass through northern Virginia's suburban sprawl and nondescript scrub forest with occasional vistas of the lower Potomac Tidewater to enter the Richmond-Petersburg suburbs before passing on to more nondescript woods interspersed with crossroad villages and towns for the rest of the journey. A nice exception is Ashland, Virginia, just north of Richmond. The tracks run at street level there all the way through town, and there are some beautiful homes to be viewed from the west side of the train. Let's watch. The schedule between Washington, D.C. Union Station and Savannah is quite civilized, with a scheduled departure southbound at 9:25 a.m. scheduled to arrive at Savannah about 12 hours later. The northbound departure is a bit earlier at 7:25 a.m. As for the train itself, we were impressed by the overall cleanliness of its interior on both trips. The outsides of the windows were dirty, however, and this was true on our northbound return, even though Savannah is the point of origin, and one would think it possible for Amtrak to contract with someone to clean the windows there. Speaking of which, Amtrak apparently has no facility in Savannah to restock the cafe car with food for its northbound journey. Having to check out of our downtown hotel before breakfast was available, we were disappointed on boarding at 7:15 to find that there were no breakfast, lunch, or dinner entrees available for the whole trip, only something called egg bites for breakfast, some cold sandwiches, and snacks. Fortunately, the train was not full, so what little was there didn't run out. I tried to video as many stations as I could on the trip, but the roofs of the passenger platforms of a lot of these stations are perfectly positioned to block one's view from the coach windows.
Nice little station, you can see it.
Nevertheless, I can share several of them with you, some from the southbound trip and some on the return leg a week later. Now look, I don't want to bash Amtrak. It has always been a political football.
And once again, efforts are frustrated.
So negative comments so far and to follow are not so much criticism as a caveat emptor.
There it is.
As far as we're concerned, Amtrak is a lot slower, but it beats air travel hands down. We were impressed by the way the locomotive crew made up lost time on the southbound trip.
We're 6.5 hours into the journey. Lost some time with a lot of congestion on the railroad, CSX, between Richmond and Petersburg, and then there's a lot of track work going on in southern Virginia heading toward North Carolina. But the crew's made up good time. We're only about 15 minutes behind schedule, about halfway between Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Florence, South Carolina. So things seem to be going pretty well.
We were only 5 minutes behind schedule arriving in Savannah after a 12-hour trip. That's pretty good. But on the northbound trip, we lost over an hour and a half at the crew change station in Dillon, South Carolina, because the scheduled engineer was a no-show and the replacement was called late. Now that's a procedural problem that ought to be addressed. Arriving 2 hours late at our Alexandria, Virginia destination, we were fortunately able to arrange an overnight stay there to avoid making a late night journey home to western Pennsylvania instead of the late evening drive that we had originally planned. Some closing thoughts. This was not our first long-distance trip with Amtrak, so we've come to expect service hiccups on long trips. Forewarned is forearmed. For example, we packed some foil pouch tuna salad, some crackers, and bottles of water just in case of a longer than usual delay, like that infamous 40-hour auto train debacle a month before our trip, and this was in 2023. Now, the emergency rations weren't needed this time, but they might have been called on during the northbound trip. We still find Amtrak a superior mode of travel, far more comfortable, if a lot slower, than air and less stressful than driving. So, if time is not a major factor, we'll choose Amtrak every time. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll take some time to look at our other ones. See you soon.